Hello everyone, this is Medically Vrushali and please make sure to subscribe. In this video, we are going to talk about the endocrine system. The endocrine system is responsible for regulating various physiological processes in the body by secreting hormones. Let's say this is an endocrine cell. They produce the hormones and are released into the bloodstream, where they travel to target organs or tissues to influence their activity. The main function of the endocrine system include regulation of metabolism, mainly by insulin, glucagon, and thyroid hormones. Growth and development. Growth hormone, along with thyroid hormones and sex hormones like estrogen and testosterone, regulates physical growth, maturation, and development, especially during puberty. Homeostasis maintenance. The endocrine system helps maintain stable internal conditions despite external changes like blood sugar levels, blood pressure, and body temperature. Response for stress. Hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, also known as epinephrine, are released during stressful situations to prepare the body for a fight or flight response. Reproduction. Hormones such as estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone regulate reproductive functions, including menstruation, pregnancy, and sexual behavior. Major endocrine glands include hypothalamus, pituitary gland, thyroid gland, adrenal gland, pancreas, ovaries, and testes. Other than these, it also includes pineal gland, parathyroid gland, which is behind the thyroid glands, thymus, and also heart, digestive tract, kidney, and adipose tissue. They also act as endocrine glands. Other than endocrine signaling, there is paracrine and autocrine signaling as well. As we now know that in endocrine signaling, the hormones are released into the bloodstream to reach the target tissue. But in paracrine signaling, it is involved in localized communication in which the hormones travel directly to the cell nearby. Whereas in autocrine signaling, the receptors are present on the same cell, and this mainly regulates cellular growth and development. Now let's discuss the classes of hormones. So, according to Harrison, there are five classes of hormones: amino acid derivatives, small neuropeptides, large proteins, steroid hormones, and vitamin derivatives. For the amino acid derivatives, small neuropeptides, and large proteins, the receptors on the target cells are present on the cell membrane, whereas for steroid hormones, the receptors are present in the cytoplasm or in the nucleus. Now let's talk about the example. Examples would be difficult for you now if you don't know about the hormones. But once you finish this, it will be easy for you to come back here and go through these examples. So for amino acid derivatives, the examples are dopamine, catecholamine, and thyroid hormones. Now for small neuropeptides, the examples are GnRH, TRH, somatostatin, and vasopressin. It sounds difficult, right? But it won't be once you finish this chapter and come back here. And as for large proteins, the examples are insulin, LH, and PTH. For steroid hormones, the examples are cortisol and estrogen. Whereas for vitamin derivatives, the examples will be retinoids, obviously vitamin A and vitamin D. Let's take a closer look at the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is connected to the hypothalamus via a stalk or infundibulum. As you can see it clearly here. The pituitary gland has two lobes, posterior lobe and an anterior lobe. Posterior lobe is also known as neurohypophysis and anterior lobe is also known as adenohypophysis. The posterior lobe does not produce any hormones. Instead, it simply stores the hormones like ADH and oxytocin, which are actually produced in the hypothalamus. Whereas the anterior lobe has its own cells that produce the specific type of hormones upon the specific type of signal from the hypothalamus. I hope it's all clear till now. Let's move forward and understand the physiology of this hormone signaling and production in the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. First thing to know is that during development, the base of brain and the base of mouth, that is Redke's pouch, start growing towards each other and form the posterior and anterior pituitary. And because of this, the posterior pituitary is connected directly via nerve fibers, therefore named as neurohypophysis, whereas the anterior pituitary is connected to the hypothalamus via the portal capillaries, therefore named as adenohypophysis. Okay, easy, clear. Let's move. Let's say this is a hypothalamus. It don't look like one, but I'm telling you, this is a hypothalamus. Just don't look at the drawing, okay? So this is hypothalamus, and there are different nuclei which will produce a particular hormone and will transport down via these axons into the vesicles and will be released on getting a certain stimulus. There are actually many different types of nuclei in the hypothalamus, but this one here, it is a supraoptic nucleus which is responsible for the production of antidiuretic hormone, basically ADH, also known as vasopressin, which helps regulate water balance in the body. By controlling the amount of water reabsorbed by kidneys, the stimuli for its release include increased blood osmolarity, which is a primary stimulus. High osmolarity means when blood becomes more concentrated, such as during dehydration. The hypothalamus detects this and triggers the release of ADH. And what this ADH actually do? It will go to the kidneys and it will tell the kidney to reabsorb more and more water from the urine, therefore reducing urine output and diluting the blood. Also, low blood volume or low blood pressure acts as a stimuli for the release of ADH. Obviously, when blood volume decreases due to blood loss or dehydration, the receptors in the heart and blood vessels. Do you know what receptors are these? These are baroreceptors. These baroreceptors send signals to the hypothalamus, promoting ADH release to retain water and maintain blood pressure. Okay, moving forward. Another type of nucleus in the hypothalamus is paraventricular nucleus, which is responsible for the production and release of oxytocin. Oxytocin is primarily involved in childbirth and lactation, as well as social bonding. Its release is triggered by stretching of the cervix and uterus during labor. As the baby moves into the birth canal, the stretching of the cervix signals the hypothalamus to release oxytocin. This hormone stimulates uterine contractions, aiding in childbirth. Also, suckling of the baby during breastfeeding. Suckling of the baby during breastfeeding stimulates the release of oxytocin. When a baby suckles at the mother's breast, there are sensory receptors, and these sensory receptors send signals to the hypothalamus, leading to the release of oxytocin. This causes the milk ducts in the breast to contract, allowing milk to be ejected. Another trigger for its release is social or emotional bonding. Oxytocin is sometimes called the love hormone because its release can be stimulated by physical touch, emotional bonding, and feelings of trust or affection. Both these neurons together form a tract known as hypothalamic hypophyseal It is known as hypothalamic hypophyseal tract. This was about the hormone regulation in the posterior pituitary. Now let's move forward and talk about the anterior pituitary hormones. So, unlike posterior pituitary, the anterior pituitary has its own cells to produce hormones. These cells are corticotropes, thyrotropes, somatotropes, lactotropes, and gonadotropes. These cells get signal from the hypothalamus in the form of hormones to release another hormone from the anterior pituitary. Sounds quite confusing, but I'm telling you it's not. Let's see how. For example, the paraventricular nucleus. It, along with the production of oxytocin for posterior pituitary, also has a role in the production of another hormone, that is CRH, corticotropin releasing hormone. CRH is released in response to stress. For example, physical, emotional, or physiological stress like illness, injury, or psychological pressure. Then this CRH will move down through the hypophyseal portal system, this over here, and reach the anterior pituitary, giving a positive signal to the corticotrope to release ACTH, that is adrenocorticotropic hormone, and alpha MSH, that is melanocyte stimulating hormone. And this ACTH will further go and give positive signal to the adrenal cortex to release cortisol, which helps the body respond to stress and maintain metabolism. Okay, so what's going on here? This is paraventricular nucleus, and it releases what? It releases CRH, which is actually released when there is stress. And this CRH will go down through this hypophyseal portal system and go and act on the posterior on the anterior pituitary. And this anterior pituitary will now, because of the positive stimulus, will release ACTH and alpha MSH. This ACTH will further go and give the positive signal to whom? To adrenal cortex. And this adrenal cortex will finally release cortisol, which will help the body to respond when there is stress and to maintain metabolism. The same paraventricular nucleus is also responsible for the production of TRH, that is thyrotropin releasing hormone. TRH is released in response to low thyroid hormone in the bloodstream. Cold exposure can also trigger TRH release, which is important to increase metabolism and generate heat, because this go to the thyrotropes in the anterior pituitary and will give positive stimulus to the thyrotropes to release TSH, that is thyrotrope stimulating hormone, which will go and act on the thyroid gland and will release thyroid hormones like T3 and T4, which will regulate the metabolism. Another nucleus in the hypothalamus is the arcuate nucleus, which is responsible for the release of three hormones. First one is the PIH, that is prolactin inhibiting hormone, also known as dopamine. Remember, most of the hormones from hypothalamus have a positive effect, that is stimulating effect on the pituitary gland, but dopamine has a negative effect, that is inhibiting effect. Now there are lactotropes in the anterior pituitary which are responsible for releasing prolactin, but as the dopamine is released from the hypothalamus, it gives negative signal, or simply say it inhibits the lactotropes from producing prolactin. So, in order to increase the production and release of prolactin from lactotropes, dopamine levels should be low. This prolactin is responsible for lactation. Dopamine release is triggered by pleasurable or rewarding experiences, for example, eating, socializing, accomplishing tasks, or experiencing positive emotions. Physical activities can also increase dopamine levels, thus inhibiting prolactin. Dopamine release is also associated with learning and goal oriented behaviors. Second hormone from the arcuate nucleus is growth hormone releasing hormone, which is triggered by factors such as exercise, deep sleep, especially stages 3 and 4 of non REM sleep, hypoglycemia, that is, low blood sugar, and high levels of amino acid, especially after protein rich meals. This growth hormone releasing hormone then goes and gives positive signal to the somatotrope of anterior pituitary to release growth hormone. But the third hormone from the arcuate nucleus, that is somatostatin, have a negative effect on this somatotrope and stop the release of growth hormone. Now, the last type of nuclei in the hypothalamus is the preoptic nucleus, responsible for releasing GnRH, that is gonadotropin releasing hormone. GnRH stimulates the anterior pituitary to release luteinizing hormone, just say LH, and follicle stimulating hormone, simply FSH, both of which are essential for reproductive functions. Now, as both are produced from gonadotropes, then how does the cell know when to produce which one? Like, it's confusing for the gonadotropes. So, for that, it all depends on the frequency of GnRH. If the frequency is high, then gonadotropes will produce LH. And if the frequency of this GnRH is low, then gonadotropes will produce FSH. GnRH is released when levels of sex hormones drop, and increased release of GnRH is one of the key triggers for the onset of puberty. Okay, done. Let's summarize to make things more clear. This is hypothalamus and this is pituitary gland, which has two lobes: posterior lobe, also known as neurohypophysis, and anterior lobe, also known as adenohypophysis. Posterior pituitary don't produce any hormones. Instead, it simply stores hormones produced from hypothalamus, like ADH and oxytocin, whereas anterior pituitary has its own cells to produce hormones like from the somatotrope, gonadotrope, thyrotrope, lactotrope, and corticotrope. In hypothalamus, there are many different nuclei responsible for production and release of hormones. This is supraoptic nucleus, which is responsible for release of ADH, also known as vasopressin. This is paraventricular nucleus. It is responsible for release of oxytocin. And the same paraventricular nucleus, it is also responsible for release of CRH and TRH. CRH will stimulate the corticotrope to release ACTH and alpha MSH, whereas TRH will stimulate the thyrotrope in the anterior pituitary to release TSH, and this TSH will go and act on the thyroid gland to produce more thyroid hormones like T3 and T4. Next one is the arcuate nucleus. It produces three hormones. The first one is dopamine. Second one is growth hormone releasing hormone. Third one is somatostatin. Dopamine decreases the release of prolactin, or it simply inhibits the release of prolactin. It goes on the lactotrope and inhibit the production of prolactin there. Growth hormone releasing hormone, it will give a positive stimuli to the somatostatin to produce growth hormone, whereas somatostatin will inhibit this somatotrope from releasing growth hormone. And the last nuclei was preoptic nucleus, which is responsible for production of GnRH. And this GnRH will further give positive stimuli to the anterior pituitary to release LH and FSH from gonadotrope. FSH is released when the frequency is low, whereas LH is released when the frequency of GnRH is high. That's all. I hope that's all clear for you. I tried my best to simplify the explanation as much as possible. Please do hit the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Plus, do leave your comments below in the comment section. Thank you.